Okay, we're back again. I just want to, at an expo on the weekend, I saw this new technology, and some of you have probably seen it before. But if you have two iPads, or in the classroom of the future, whether you all have iPads, or some of you have a Mac with that app, and I can have my iPad here with the PowerPoint slides, and as I swipe on the iPad, then the actual same image on your computer is shown. Okay, and you can write on it. And then they're developing this app so in the future that you can actually write, and then that will be registered back one way in two-way mode. So very interesting things that are happening out there. And you only need an iPad 2, you don't need an iPad 3. So you buy two iPad 2s, walk around as a teacher with the iPad 2, and the other one's plugged into the PowerPoint. I was telling them that's what you do. And said, yeah, we didn't think of it that way. Okay, because most schools do not have Macs integrated into PowerPoint presentations. They're using the PC mode. So I was just telling them how they could market their technology more efficiently. Did you know your future job opportunities is all tied to this whole notion of decentralization? If organizations didn't listen to the stock market, didn't decentralize, we probably wouldn't need accounting as the way we use it. We probably don't need auditors. We don't need you to come and consult. We don't need you to do many things. Organisations can just be a small family firm and just go along with their lives week to week, year to year. But because organisations are large, ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? Okay, let's just stop here. If the lecture is voluntary, if you want to talk, can you put your hand up now? Or leave? Okay. See, the lecture is voluntary, you don't have to come. You don't have to come, all right? But don't come and talk, all right? Otherwise you're disturbing other people. Okay? Don't come and talk. Otherwise, you're disturbing other people in the lecture. Right? So, I'm here for you, okay? I don't need to come here. Okay? We can put everything online and you can watch it online if you want to. But we're in a community, so try and not talk, not because of me, doesn't worry me, but others want to listen, okay? So please help. What I want to cover over the next 4 or 5 learning objectives is the following. Organisations are large, they have to decentralise. You just heard from yourself, you just heard from Kitty, not from me, that they've set up profit centres to deal with their control problem. That wasn't a textbook, that's something real, that's a company 3 hours just across the border. This is what they're doing, okay? So we know that's real. We know this actually happens. So what is a profit centre? In the last lecture, we learnt that profit centre is what? The people are made responsible for profits, not just for the costs, which is a cost centre. But they're not made responsible for the investment, which is a return on assets, something like an investment centre. What learning objective 2 and 3 and 4 are about is if we have an investment centre, that is now you're in charge of an investment, then how are we going to measure your performance? Or how should I set up the measures to evaluate you so you will behave exactly how I want you to behave? Okay? You see, with investment centres, the problem is there's a time frame involved. Do you know what the average term of a CEO is in the US?
3 years.
About how did you know?
I think you have mentioned in previous.
Oh, okay, all right, very good. Okay, about 3 years. Okay, do you think when a firm makes a multi-million-dollar investment, it's just going to be for 3 years? Less, or do you think it's going to be more? Often it's going to be more. So how do you get someone that on average is only going to be around for 3 years to make good decisions for the organisation, like investments that are going to be around for 10 years, 15, 20 years? You know, do you think they care beyond their 3-year period? At the very minimum, you can't expect them to care, okay? You can't expect them to care, all right? So what do you do? So this is, you can think about some measures, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Or you can think about some different ways, different analytics, or different ways of calculating profit. Not the accounting way, not the taxation way, but another way. Now I'll tell you about that, and that is in the form of negative depreciation. So you don't depreciate heavily in the early years, you depreciate heavy in the later years. So it forces CEOs to invest in longer term projects. Okay? That's not in your textbook. That's not in the accounting standards. You cannot do that as an accountant. You can't do it for taxation. All right? But I'm just saying, to solve an agency problem, that's one way you can do it. Remember, how many of you are studying taxation? Great. So you know what I'm talking about. Depreciation is important for taxation. There are two different ways. One is straight line, and the other one is diminishing value. Diminishing value forces managers, especially if they get a bonus on their profits or return on the investment, it forces them to invest in shorter term investments, not longer term. Okay. If you want to invest in longer term, make it appreciating value depreciation. Okay. So then the effect of the depreciation is going to be much less on their bonus in the early years. So they're more likely to go and look long term beyond their 3 years. Okay. That is not consistent with the accounting standards or the tax code, but it may solve an agency problem. Are you with me? All right. Here is another way. All right. We can use return on investment, residual income, economic value added, or return on sales. I will quickly go over what each of those measures mean. Okay. ROI is an accounting measure divided by the accounting measure of the investment. So you're using the accounting system. Why do we do that? Well, the system's already there, so it's very easy to calculate. We're good. Okay? You may want to have this. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay. Income divided by investment. It's very popular. The system is in place, and it may be compared to other ROIs inside and outside the firm. So what multinationals are good at doing is comparing the ROI or the profit of one country with another country, and they say, well, hang on, your return is less than that. Or comparing one division with another, hang on, your return is less than yours. What's going on? Okay. They like doing these comparisons. But there's a problem there. There's a controllability issue which can cause, if you're in a division facing a harsher environment, then you're getting penalised by being compared with someone that doesn't face a harsh environment. Okay? So everything else being equal, you'd want more compensation, or you'd want lower weighting on that comparison. Okay? Okay, that's the ROI. Dupont, it's also known as the Dupont Method, because Dupont many, many years ago came up with breaking down the profit ROI into many segments, You've got the income side, you've got the cost side, then that broke down into other segments. Dupont Method of profitability analysis. So margin and turnover. All right, how many of you have been to an electronics expo? Some of you. I know, because you came last weekend. Okay. What you probably didn't see at the ones in town were the specialised chip manufacturers. These are manufacturers that actually make programmable logic chips. So the chip that's made, it's actually, they put a software on, module on, and it can be pre-programmed, reprogrammed. And so these companies can make huge margins by not only having the hardware, but all the software combined. And you can see their profit margins are very, very high. Let's have a look at another group in the industry, circuit boards. What is a circuit board? I think I've got a circuit board here. I don't know if I brought it with me. I have too many. Oh, I do. Okay, so see this? This is a PCB. How many of you have seen a red PCB before? What is the normal colour for a PCB? PCB is a printed circuit. Okay, so why is this red and why is the normal colour green? Do you know why? Green is easier to check for quality. That's the only reason why green is the dominant colour. But for marketing purposes, sometimes they make PCBs red, blue, black, all different colours. Okay, here's another question, nothing to do with accounting. Which product does this PCB go into? You all use one. No, close. You all use one. It's definitely not a phone. Can you think this would go on a phone? I don't think this would go on a phone, all right? So pass it around. No, not iPad. You don't all use an iPad. Close. Okay, DVD player. DVD, Blu-ray video player. Okay, so pass that around. Okay, don't worry, there's no radiation on that. Okay, it's all right. Okay, so, and that's what we mean by circuit boards. These companies make things like that. Okay, and then let's have a look at the memory chips. All of you are using memory. Guess what? These companies don't make as many profits. Okay, so now that I've got your attention in terms of the profit, notice specialised chips, profits, very good. Okay, circuit boards, profits reasonable. When we talked to the PCB manufacturers across the border, last November we went to an expo just dedicated to PCBs, like the one I'm passing around. Their average profit margin is about 6%. Ladies and gentlemen, class, let me put it in another way. How about all of you give me $100,000 and I'll give you $6,000 in 12 months' time? Put your hand up if you would like, you're happy with that return. Put your hand up if you would never do something like that. Okay, all right. It's not very much, right? Like even the bank, it's not much. Well, yes, you can get yuan deposits now for 4%, some Australian dollar deposits for 5-6% if you go for long enough. This is, look, less than 6% for a highly risky business. And only that little return. Wow. You know, things are tough, okay, in the real commercial land. So be aware of that. What about memory chips? Well, things are very tough. Why? Because they depend a lot on the commoditized memory, cost of memory. It's out of the control of the company, and every one of you are paying less and less and less and less and less for memory. You're now paying, you know, you expect your memory to double every 2 or 3 years for the same price. You buy a USB now for $5 US or less. Okay, even if you want a USB. Now you don't need one because you use the cloud instead. All right, so that's what we mean by profit. So let's get back to this simple example in the textbook. Okay, so now we have a return on investment of 18% for snack foods and the appliance division 18%. Okay, all right, and we have year 2, the return on investment. Snack foods is doing very, very well. Appliance division, not so well. Okay, so what do? Well, let's have a look. What would you say here? We need to compare a little bit more. Snack foods has much higher turnover, lower turnover and higher margin than the appliance division. Very interesting. Okay, notice the appliance division has lower margin. So what do you do? What signal that gives you in terms of the margin? How do you improve margin? Either reduce costs or increase price. How do you increase price? You've got to have something new. You've got to have some products around. You've got to have a strong brand name to do that. Otherwise, you're a cost leader, and the only way you can make money over time is by cutting your costs. Okay, let me give you a real example of a transformer manufacturer. How many of you know what a transformer is? Okay, so transformers can be very, very, very little small or can be very, very big. A transformer is something you plug into the power. Okay, don't do this at home. When I was a kid, I loved electronics. And you know the little motors that you buy for model planes or little cars or something? We could buy the motor. I connected that up to a power cord, and then I plugged it into the 240 volts power and turned it on. I thought it would work even faster. No, it just blew up. So I did that when I was a kid. All right. So these transformers transform 240 volts down to something like 1 amp, half an amp or less, so you can power your own consumer electronics. This transformer manufacturer has not changed its selling price since 2008 because of cost pressures in the industry. Just cost down. They just haven't been able to improve their price. But their costs have basically doubled. Costs have gone up. So the profit margin of 2008 was about 20%. Now the profit margin is around 10-15%. Okay, so they've had to wear a smaller margin. Okay, keep in mind that's what we mean by margin. Sometimes you don't have control over the revenue side. You work like crazy to control the cost side. All right, so we know the advantages, know the disadvantages. So a typical exam question would be something like you do calculation for one division versus another, and then you may have to do an evaluation about which division is performing better. Okay, keep that in mind. For learning objective 4, we're looking at residual income measure. Now remember, here's the facts. Number 1, the average CEO tenure is about 3 years. Great, we know that. Number 2, investments normally last longer than 10 years, or even longer than 3 years at least. Okay, so what do you do? What do you do to get short-termism, myopic behaviour, to minimise that? Well, you require managers to get a minimum required rate of return, not to accept projects which will be below a minimum required rate of return. How do you do that? We use a residual income. So you have a required rate of return times the investment, and any return above that, then you reward the managers for that. All right? That's learning objective 4. So let's go through a real example. Some of you have these numbers blocked out. Is that right? Yes? You have that blocked out. What I want you to do is circle the following. Circle this thing down here. Can you see that? Oh, okay. Sorry. Just circle this. This is your starting point. This is your starting point. Right? Starting point. You already have $50 million operating costs. You already have a minimum return of $5 million. You have residual income $2.5 million. this question is asking you, as a manager, do you want to invest in project 1 or 2 or both on top of what you are currently doing? You with me? On top of, not separate, not independent. So if we invest in project 1 only, so our investment of 50 million is now 60 million. Can you see that?
It's covered.
Don't worry, in your next slide, the same numbers are shown. Can you see that? Made a good class. The point was just made. Those numbers are covered when you first see them. If you have a look at the slide just below, you have the same list of numbers. Can you all see that, just to be clear? Okay, great. All right. If you invest in project 1, your 50 million investment is now 60. Okay, if you invest in project 2 only, that's 4 million, your 50 million investment is now 54. Can you see that? All right. If you invest in both, your 50 million investment is now 64. Okay, that's how you read those 4 groups. So here are the scenarios. Don't do anything. Okay, project 1 only, project 2 only, project 1 and 2. Can you see that? All right, so let's go to the next step. All right, so there's our project 1. We can just have project 2, or as you can see, project 1 and 2, it's all covered, but you know the numbers because on the next slide, your average return on return on investment currently is 5%. So what do we do now? Well, let's do some calculations. If we have project 1, it's 4.66%. What would be the return on investment for project 2? Is that shown in the notes? Okay, 4.75 for both and 5.07. Okay, so that's a simple calculation. So under residual income approach, we would choose this alternative. You would not choose alternative 1, that is add project 1. You would not add both projects if that was the rule that you had to follow as a divisional manager. Okay, so the disadvantages of residual income. You may have 2 divisions. One is really, 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 really large compared to the other one. Like 15 million is, what, 6 times larger than division B. One is very, very large, okay? And its residual return is only half. So okay, so does that mean you penalise this division A? What if you close down division A because the return is not that great? It may jeopardise all the company's operations because that division is very, very, very large. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Residual income is very nice when you're comparing very similarly sized investments. Okay, if one is really, really large compared to the other, the problems of managing a large is so much greater than managing a smaller operation. All right, so keep that in mind. It's difficult to directly compare. Okay, it does not discourage myopic behaviour. How many of you know what discourage myopic behaviour means? Myopic behaviour is just looking to tomorrow, just short term. Okay, short-sighted. You're just looking to the next big paycheck, okay, or your own self-interest in terms of your own timeline, how long you're going to be in that job, maybe, okay, or the next reporting period, the next quarter, okay, the next time you have to face the shareholders, okay, that's myopic behaviour, okay. So we want to try and stop that. So some people have said, Stern Stewart, consulting firm out of the US, they come along and said, well, we've got something that we can make millions of dollars in convincing companies to use. We call it EVA. How many of you have heard of EVA before? Okay, here's the deal, and it's so funny. Academics have studied companies that have used EVA, and on average they find that they don't necessarily outperform those that do not use EVA. Okay, and the classic companies that Stern Stewart used in their advertising were companies from the late 70s, the early 80s, when there was a more stable economic environment. Okay. Okay, weighted average cost of EVA, we use the weighted average cost of capital times total assets minus current liabilities. So it's a kind of a little different from residual income. Okay, it's just a little bit different. All right. Return on sales is income divided by sales. Okay, that's good. Make more sales, make income. Widely understood. So basically the textbook is taking you various steps of setting up performance measures. Number 1, choose your performance measure. Number 2, choose your time period. Multiple periods. Time horizon. Is it next quarter, next 12 months, next 2 years, next 3 years? 4 possible. Then what are the alternative definitions? We could use different definitions of assets available. Assets employed, shareholders' equity. The big decision is just to be consistent. That's all. There's no standard to say you have to use one and not the other. Remember, this is about performance evaluation. It's about, ladies and gentlemen, this is about alignment. We just want to align the manager's interests with the company's interests. That's the objective. Without doing this, generally large companies, large decentralized organizations will have agency problems, agency costs. That is, managers not behaviour in the best interests of shareholders. Okay, myopic behaviour. All right, learning objective 6, measurement alternatives. Current cost today, purchasing an asset, historical costs. So do you use current cost, current value, net book value? It doesn't matter, just be consistent from period to period. Be consistent from division to division. Then you can do comparison. There are 2 types of comparisons. There are comparisons at one point in time across divisions, across countries, across regions, or you can have comparisons over time. It's 2 simple ways. When I say be consistent on those 2 dimensions. Consistent over time or across in one point time period. Okay, historically, you need to set target levels of performance. Continuous improvement component. Big decision. Think about what is achievable or think about what is more difficult. There are 2 things. Targets can be for planning purposes. Targets can be for motivation purposes. Planning purposes, it's important that things are achievable for planning purposes. Step 6, choosing the timing of the feedback. Choosing the timing of the feedback. Here's the big decision. I want you to think about, do you do it for strategy? What about the balanced scorecard perspective or the costs of data collection? Okay, so if you have lots of feedback, then there's going to be extra control costs. Objective 7. Okay, learning objective 7 will not be directly covered in the exam, so we can skip over that. But if you want to know more about it, I have written a whole article on that and I can give that copy to you. My first book covered that area. All right. Finally, we want to trade off incentives versus imposing risk. Remember the 3-legged stool? What are the 3 legs? Decentralization, measurement, which is learning objectives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we get to 8. What are we talking about now? Rewards. You remember, if we have decentralization measurement, we don't have rewards. What are we missing? Missing the incentive. We're missing that power to get people to pay attention to the measures. Yes. So, as I said, the basic thing you need to know with moral hazard is that people will want to do less and they may not do the same thing when they do things for the owner. The other thing you need to know is that there are preferred performance measures. There's sensitive, factors beyond multiple tasks, motivation. These are all different dimensions, and they come under the purview of how do you motivate people? How do you motivate people? Okay? And if you ask consultants when they go into organisations, they talk about, oh, let's use SMART. Okay? So it's specific, measurable, achievable, okay? Realistic and timely.